So welcome, friends. I'll just take a moment as folks are joining in to enjoy the space that you're in. You might want to look around the space you're in, just allowing your eyes to move out and away from the screen, to look out to the horizon if you have a horizon, or look out the window. So just reminding ourselves we don't have to look into the screen. And also reminding ourselves that we have a body. So starting to come into relationship with the body, if you aren't already. And possibly the movement of the breath. And as folks are joining, we're just taking a few moments to let our eyes go where they want to go. So look around the space you're in, or look out to the horizon. And also just to come into relationship with your body and with your breath. Checking in with how you are in this moment, how the body is. So beginning with attentiveness, with gentleness, with kindness, and with relationship with what is here and now, what is present here and now. And so welcome. It's really good to be here with you this morning, our first Sunday in March. And my name's Djuna Devereaux. And this morning I'd like to explore Kuan Yin in everyday life. And so the way the morning will go is I will do a little bit of chanting. We'll chant a couple of shorter mantras to Kuan Yin, Kuan Yin's heart mantras, and then also a longer mantra, and end with, again, a shorter mantra to Kuan Yin. And then I'm going to talk for a little bit about this practice, this meditative practice of returning the hearing, or returning the mind back into the womb of awareness or the heart. And for some of you, this will be very familiar, and others it might be very new. And so either way, it's an opportunity to open to this particular Dharma door that is quite powerful. And then after I share a little bit and a little bit of instruction, we'll sit and we'll have 20 minutes at least to sit, which will be mostly silent. So you'll have the opportunity to just really try this on if it's new for you, or to deepen it if this is very much a part of your practice. And then after the sit, I'll share just a little bit about my own journey with the Kuan Yin Dharmas, especially this kind of sense of the everydayness of these practices that are ancient and very deep, but also can just be woven into any moment of an ordinary life. So let's begin with some chanting, some devotional practice. And I'll bring up the chant book here and share my screen. And we're going to, let's see. Can everyone see that okay? The refuges and precepts? Yeah, thank you for the thumbs up there. So let's just go down to the heart mantra to Kuan Yin, and I'll make the screen larger. So Om Mani Padme Hum, you might have heard this chant before, it's very familiar. And this is the heart mantra of Avalokiteshvara, or Kuan Yin. And Avalokiteshvara is a Sanskrit name for Kuan Yin. And also it is said, I believe in the in the Lotus Sutra, or possibly the Shurangama Sutra, that Kuan Yin actually learned their meditation method from a more ancient bodhisattva named Avalokiteshvara. So there's a sense of this embodiment of compassion and of responsiveness that goes back into the midst of time. So we'll chant it, call and response, Om Mani Padme Hum, so that you can get a sense of the rhythm and the tune. Om Mani Padme Hum. 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 And then all together. Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum. And once more. Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum. And after the sound is ended, just take a moment to listen into the silence. And then we'll scroll to the Great Compassion Mantra, which begins with a shorter mantra to Kuan Yin. So Namo, Namo means to honor, but the way that Tanisra and Kittisaro translate that word Namo is like to return. So I return my life, meaning I return the sense of going somewhere, the sense of a me creating this world in which I live, and all the thoughts and opinions and views. Namo, to give that back, just to offer that back into the depth listening. So to the one who listens at ease to the sounds of the world. So yin means sound, or to observe sound. Shur means the world, Kuan Yin Pusa. And Dabe is great compassion. So Namo Dabe Kuan Yin Pusa. And let's just chant this one together. And we'll chant it through 3 times. Just join in as you're ready. Namo Dabe Kuan Yin Pusa. Namo Dabe Kuan Yin Pusa. Namo Dabe Kuan Yin Pusa. And so that shorter mantra leads us into this longer mantra, which is a Chinese transliteration of the Sanskrit. And this is really, this longer mantra, these 82 lines are describing and honoring Kuan Yin's 42 response bodies. So the manifestations of the compassionate heart that manifest in the world in these different forms. So like a sword to cut through ignorance, a bell, jilla, jilla is a bell. We also have the sound of the conch, sounding out of compassion, hulu, 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 hulu. And so these many different forms that Kuan Yin will manifest in. Kitty Saro often talks about their dog Jack that was a Zulu dog, was a stray dog that came down the mountain when they were living in South Africa as a puppy and just entered their life in a very challenging time. And that for them, Jack was a manifestation of Kuan Yin. And so as we chant this, we might have that sense of what are the ways in which a compassionate response has manifest in a very tangible way in our own lives. And I know that this is long. And I know also if you've been here every Sunday, you've probably chanted it every Sunday. But I know when I started with it, it was like, every time it was like, oh God, can't wait till this is over, because it's a lot and we can get lost. And just some encouragement that over the years, for me, letting go of trying to get it all and listening more, like stepping back while chanting it and listening to actually there's sort of a background music. This is described as like a flowing water. And especially when you chant it in a group, but even just chanting it together as we are, you can kind of listen for that background that helps to break up the kind of concretization of the thinking mind. So let's chant it together. Namo Haladano Dola Ye Namo Ali Ye Bolu polu jadi shao bolaye putti sato poye moha sato poye moha jalu ni jaye nansa panla faye soda no dashi namo shi jili toyim mangali e polu jadi shirfo la lang topa Namo no la jinshir shili moha pando same sappa tudu shirpung ashuryan sappa sato namo posado namo poche mofata doda jirto nanapalu shilu jadi Jaladi shili moha putti sato sappa sappa mola mola moshi moshili tuyun Dulu dulu jamming dulu dulu fasha yedi moha fasha yedi tola tola dilini Shirfola ye jilla jilla momo famola mudili ishi ishi shirno shirno la shanfola shele Fasha fashion fola shele hulu hulu mola hulu hulu shili sola sola shili shili sulu sulu puttiye puttiye puttoye midili no la jinchurdili shiny no poye mono Sopaha shitoye sopaha moha ashitoye sopaha shito yui shirpan laye sopaha nola jinchur sopaha mola nola sopaha shilu sangha mucheye sopa moha ashitoye sopaha jajila ashitoye sopaha boto moja shitoye Sopaha nola jincher panchela ye sopaha mopali shangela ye sopaha Namo hula danandola ye namo ali ye bolu jadi shaubola ye sopaha Nanshi dandu mandola bato ye sopaha And then we'll finish with a shorter mantra. So it's just the Namo Kuan Yin Pusa without the Dabe. Namo Kuan Yin Pusa. Namo Kuan Yin Pusai na mo quan yin Pusai na mo quan yin Pusa Namo Kuan Yin Pusai Namo Kuan Yin Pusa. And again, when the sound ends, what remains as we continue to listen? So I'll stop my screen share. And as I said, I'm just going to talk a little bit about Kuan Yin's meditation method, and then we'll have a good amount of time to practice with it. And so Kuan Yin, as I said, is this embodiment of the compassionate heart, and really is the embodiment of our own heart, is the embodiment of the great body of nature, is the embodiment of any source of compassion that we've ever experienced. So these are different ways to, I think, to connect with who and what Kuan Yin is, and again, how we can experience the manifestation of Kuan Yin in ordinary moments of our life. So this embodiment of the compassionate heart that is deeply relational, is deeply intimate with all that that's arising, but especially with suffering, with the dukkha of existence, and that is not only compassionate, but because of that intimacy, because of that deep sense of all things being interwoven, form and emptiness from the Heart Sutra, all things being interconnected, there's also a natural responsiveness. So we know this in our own practice when we feel deeply connected to another being, like a child or a pet or a parent. When we experience their suffering, there's just a natural movement to respond. And so Kuan Yin is that compassionate heart that is also able to see this wide perspective, and in that way is appropriately responsive. So that's why there's all of these manifestations, these response bodies, to respond in a way that is appropriate. And so Kuan Yin is our own heart, and Kuan Yin is our own deep listening. And so this is a practice of, it's a devotional practice, just like the chanting. And what does that mean? I was recently talking to Tanisra. It's like, how do you really describe this sense of what this practice is about? How is it different, let's say, from the Theravadan practice? And she said it's source-based. So that we, instead of watching the mind, watching what's arising in the body, watching the breath, those are all good things to do. And it's not that we deny the body or the breath or emotion or the mind, but we're actually listening into the awareness itself. So we're returning the listening, returning the mind back into into awareness or presence. And so in this way, we're turning towards a deeper source than the mind. It's not just working with the mind. We're recognizing this depth awareness that is connected with all things through time and space, and that is deeply connected with the living Dharma. Whatever is arising now is received within that awareness. So it's devotional, that in the sense also that we're recollecting what is awake and aware within each of us, and that is part of this much larger interbeing. And there's different ways, if this is a new practice, to start to feel into this. And one of them is metta. So metta is a way that we cultivate and condition the heart to grow, to open, to feel that sense of this deep ground of kindness that is its own samadhi, that is its own holding. We know this when we're in the presence of someone who's very, very kind. There's a sense that we can relax, right? That our system can let down, and that we're held and possibly able to be with what's arising, be able to contact what's arising. So metta can be this way into this inclining our awareness towards the power of an awakened heart, towards this expression of an awakened heart. Another way is that's not separate, of course, from metta, but another explanation is vitaka vichara. So maybe you've heard Tanisra Kittisaro talk about this, but vitaka is where we use a thought to meet the thinking mind, and that thought turns, it's an invitation to turn the mind back into presence, into listening, into the receptive, sometimes called womb, yoni of awareness, the receptive nature of awareness. And so vitaka, there's different vitakas, like how is it now? Or buddho, just means awake. How is it now? But today, the vitaka that I'm suggesting is Kuan Yin's name. So Namo Kwanchar Yimpusa, or it could just be Namo. So I return my life, or I honor Namo Kwanchar Yimpusa. I'm returning to this depth listening, to that which is awake, to the one who listens. And that mantra is an invitation. It stops the mind. So instead of all these thoughts and opinions and trying to solve it all, just one thought that is an invitation to listen. Okay, when the thought ends, what is there? What remains? And even between, so sometimes I'll hold the mantra Namo, Kuan, Shur, Yin, Pu, Sa. So instead of Namo, Kwanchar, Yin, Pu, Sa, just kind of like going along, there can be this slowing down and listening for the gap, the space between the words, and also then when the sound, when the mantra ends, what is there? And if it feels like, oh, I don't know if I want to use Kuan, I don't know this name and the mantra, you could use the English. So I'm returning to the listening. I'm returning to the heart. I'm returning to nature, into the depth listening of the living Dharma. So you might have your own kind of sense of what are we doing here? There actually is a movement back. There's this returning. And in this way, it's a samadhi practice because we're gathering the mind and returning the mind back into the listening. So there's a gatheredness, there's a composure. We can also just use the breath. So there's beautiful practice of using anapanasati, which is the mindfulness of the breath practice combined with Kuan Yin's name. So breathing in, breathing out, sensing the breath within the body, and then just offering the name Namo Kwanchar Yimpusa as we listen into the feeling tones in the body, the emotions that are here. So these different ways that we can contact this practice, try it on. How do we trust it, right? How do we trust it? If it's new, it can kind of be like, I don't know, what is this? What is this? And I like the teaching that trust is a somatic experience. So you could trust me. I trust Kittisaro and Tanisra. That's how I started the practice. I was like, well, they've got something really special that I experience in a somatic way. So I'm going to try this practice that they're suggesting. But just to say that you don't have to believe anything, that as we practice, we can sense into the somatic, the embodied experience. Just notice, is there a gatheredness? Is there a sense of resting in the deep knowing? Is there a sense of the suffering, the dukkha being held within this wider sphere of awareness? So last thing I'll say is, if this resonates with you, there is also a deep prayerfulness in this. There's actually a calling on this presence of the bodhisattva, of the awakened heart, that we can tap into. So there's a way that we're actually saying, be alongside me, be with me in this practice. And again, if that doesn't resonate, just let that go. But for me, it's so supportive because, again, it's not just this little mind that's going to figure it out. It's going to get through the next, thing I need to do. But I'm part of a mandala of belonging, of nature, of awareness, of deep presence, and that there's a sense of tapping into that currency or that flow. So enough said, let's sit together for, we'll have a full 20 minutes. And I didn't say this, but we will go until 10, and then at 10, from 10 to 10:20, we'll have time for Q&A. So if you have questions, we'll hold those until after the 10 o'clock hour, or that's Pacific time, top of the hour. So let's just take a comfortable seat now, or lying down, or standing, or walking. This way in which we're honoring the body, the needs of the body, and this deep presence of the body. And also being aware of the breath within the body, this movement of the life force. And if the body and breath are not safe or easeful places to rest awareness, then the practice of listening for sound is very much aligned with this Kuan Yin Dharma door of listening into the nature. So you might be practicing listening. Sometimes as we sit, there's body pain or agitation, or the mind is like a swarm of bees. Maybe there's a lot of emotion. So there might be some longer, deeper breaths just to calm the body formation. You might turn your head gently side to side. You might just softly squeeze one of your hands with the other hand, and then vice versa. Just this gentle pressure of touch into an area that might be more neutral, area of the body. And we're not trying to get rid of anything, become super calm, super enlightened. There's a way that we're opening up a spaciousness for what is here, this ground of the heart. And in this practice of touching the myriad thoughts with one thought, Namo, and returning, Namo Kuan Yin Husa, returning to the listening, returning to awareness. making an offering of the thoughts, of the plans, of the opinions, of the worries and fears, back into this alignment with awareness, with the awake, aware nature of your own heart, or the great heart of Kuan Yin. And when the thought, Namo Kuan Shi Yin Pusa, dissolves, feeling into what remains, listening into what is always here, ever present. And so now we'll drop into silence. In the last couple of minutes of our sitting, might begin again, dropping the mantra, Namo Kuan Yin Pusa, letting the mantra be an invitation into the listening, into the compassionate heart. One of the devotional practices to Kuan Yin is the Great Compassion Ceremony, which I know many of you have practiced many times. This practice of really preparing the mind and heart for these deeper, more subtle aspects of the Dharma, for also working with our own karma. So it's a way of remembering the harm that we've caused, and then calling that up, really placing that on the altar to avoid causing harm in the future. And the refrain of this ceremony is the worshipped and the worshipper are empty and still in nature. This is really the essence of the Heart Sutra. This can be helpful when there's kind of a sense of like, are we praying to a god or something here with Kuan Yin? That the sense of it's all empty and still in nature. So the sense of self and what we're bowing to are empty and still in nature. The response and the way are intertwined inconceivably. This way place of mind is like a wish-fulfilling pearl. Kuan Yin manifests in it, and I now manifest before Kuan Yin. Bowing down, I return my life in worship. So the sense that we're not separate from Kuan Yin. So I have Kuan Yin on my altar behind me, statue of Kuan Yin. And that's a reminder to return to awareness, to the heart. It's not so much something that's outside, for me, outside of who I am. It's really more bowing to my own true nature, to the true nature, rather than all of my worries that I'm often bowing to. And so this sense of the worshipped and the worshiper are empty and still in nature. The response and the way are intertwined inconceivably, has been a doorway for me into connecting with this practice, especially this response and the way. So when I was at Dharmagiri, we were doing several days of holding Kuan Yin's name just all day long on longer retreat. And during that period of time, I had a dream that I was in the shrine room. So at Dharmagiri, it's a small space, small meditation hall. Fits about 30 people, and then there's an altar. And I was sitting in my spot that I had been sitting in throughout the retreat, close to the altar, and I was meditating in the dream. I opened my eyes, and there was a woman, an African woman, because Dharmagiri is in South Africa, an African woman sitting right next to the altar. And she was very still and very this intense presence and power. And the word, just Kuan Yin was right there. And so that was a moment of like that response. There was like a response to this, just trying on the practice of holding the name, just trusting, okay, this is the way, I'm going to try this. And then this dream, it was very powerful. And I could feel then in my sitting kind of the sense of that she, in this case, as Kuan Yin manifests, she, he, they, all different in all different ways. But in this case, she was with me, was there with me. It was very supportive and powerful. And so since then, I've practiced with the holding the name. That's been the main practice for me, Namo Quan Sri Yin Pusa, just in moving through daily life, especially when daily life feels like a lot. And this sense of source has been very helpful, because often it can feel for me like I've got to do that, and oh my gosh, then I got to do that, and then how am I ever going to have time for this, and I'm not going to be ready for this event, and can get very spun out in me who's going to do all these things, when in reality I can only do one thing at a time, right? That's the only way that things happen. I can do them all at once, even though my mind is trying to figure that out. And how is it to keep coming back to what is the source behind all that doing? What is the resource? What is the essence that all that doing is going to come out of? All of that manifestation in the world, what's behind that? And the more that I can return to that, which is the listening, which is the awake, aware heart, the more there's that kind of a fuel or a resource to just do that one thing, do that email, and then that email, and then that, phone call. So very helpful to stay out of the sense of like, I got to solve all the problems. So we can learn to solve problems by listening. This is a direct quote from Kitty Saro. So we can learn to solve problems by listening. It's very helpful for me. So, okay, there's this thing, how do I, then tapping into something that's much larger than just the way that my mind can figure it out, which is very limited. And then often that response and the way are intertwined inconceivably. Something happens, something comes in, a resource, another person, a moment of rest, something, some support is there. Had an experience last summer of, I had a biopsy, which turned out to be benign, but there is, if you've ever had a biopsy, there's a time between when you get the biopsy and when you get the results. And that can be a very scary time. And I was just I had a lot of other pressures in life and was really spun. And I thought about, Kitty Sorrow would just say, just chant the Great Compassion Mantra. There'll be a response. And I was like, I don't know, I should check Google again. What are the chances of this turning out to be like that? And as we know, that more anxiety and no answers. And finally coming down to like, there is nothing I can do but to wait. There's really nothing I can do. And how about I just do the mantra, which I've been chanting a lot over the years, but I started to do 5 times a day, the long mantra that we did. Namo Hola Danandola Ye, Namo Hola Ye, Volu Jadi Shalbola Ye, again and again and again and again, just meeting that agitation with that rhythm, with those words, with that reminder of there is a responsiveness, even if it doesn't turn out to be benign. That's not what this, like, oh, I'm going to make it somehow turn out the way I want it. But that whatever comes, there'll be a way to be with it. There'll be a way to rest in that compassion, to meet that suffering with compassion, to be aligned with the bodhisattva of Kuan Yin. And that will be how I'll move into that next moment. And so over the years, this has become really central for me. And I'm surprised by it, actually. Because in the beginning, like I said, it's like, yeah, great compassion. I don't want to chant that. Can we just do this short? It sounds so lovely, and it's over, then we can just meditate. And over time, there's a way that it has worked on me, even as I've worked with it. And so this encouragement, just in a simple way, to practice this, returning the hearing, listening into the depths. This is the chant meditation, the essence of Zen. And lastly, just in a celebration before I do announcements, today is Kitty Sorrow's birthday. So we can celebrate with him, bowing to, wow, what a great compassionate manifestation of Kuan Yin he is in our lives.